Hello, welcome to Animals Attack. I'm your host, Leslie Garcia. Today, our episode takes us to the Zambezi River near Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is very well known for their luxury safaris. By day, you're next to elephants, lions, black rhinos, monkeys, and more venomous snakes than anywhere in the world. But this story isn't about sipping champagne. It's about a man named Paul Templer, who is a guide for more than 6 years on the Zambezi River. In this day in particular, the day that Paul called a bad day at the office, it was March 9th, 1996, normally the rainy season. But this day was spectacular. Temperatures hovered about 77 degrees, and it was beautiful and sunny. Paul was working as a canoe safari guide in Zimbabwe, spending his days guiding tourists down the Zambezi River. He would point out all of Africa's incredible wildlife: elephants, lions, giraffes, crocs, and, of course, hippos. Plus the fact that Africa is so well known for her diversities in culture, races, food, and the 16 or so languages spoken in that region. Paul later said, "I could go with the cliche. It was a day that started like any other." But it didn't. It started with a sense of foreboding. A friend of Paul's, who was supposed to be leading a canoe safari, came down with malaria. Paul had a feeling of trepidation, like something was just not the way it was supposed to be. But the opportunity to take the safari was fantastic. It was on one of the most beautiful stretches of river, maybe in the world. The party was about a half a mile upstream from where Devil's Cataract splashes down 300 feet over Victoria Falls. There were 7 canoes in the party. 3 held tourists, and the other 4 held Paul and 3 apprentice guides, Evan, Ben, and Mike. Things were going pretty well, and then they came across a pod of about a dozen hippos, just wallowing in the shallows. They pulled up next to them and were looking at the hippos and discussing their nature, when someone on the safari asked if it's true that hippos kill more people every year than any other animal. The answer is yes, which is why it's best to stay as far away as possible. Then suddenly there was a deafening thud, and they all knew exactly what had happened. A giant bull hippo had charged at the young guide's canoe. The canoe, piloted by Evans, was knocked off course and into the water. The canoe and guide was catapulted 4 to 5 feet in the air and then into the river. The tourists were told to paddle back to safety. Paul canoed towards Evan to help him out of the water. Evan was terrified as Paul paddled to him. And just as Paul reached out for Evan to help him on board the canoe, the water exploded and Paul finds himself literally down the throat of a giant hippo. Paul said the inside of the hippo's mouth was slimy, slippery, wet, and smelled like rotten eggs. He knew he was somewhere deep and dark and dank, and he tried to move and get himself freed, but he couldn't. His legs could move, but the rest of him couldn't. He was able to free his arms, and he could feel the bristles of the hippo's jaw. And that is when it dawned on him where he must be. He is head first to his waist down the hippo's throat. Paul, who's not a small guy, was literally quite a ways down the hippo's throat. He managed to grab a hold of the tusks and pull himself out. He burst to the surface. He had been underwater for some time, and he couldn't breathe, of course. he came face to face with Evan, who seemed to be in shock. Paul was doing his best to get himself and Evan to safety, but Evan was paralyzed with fear, possibly. Paul goes back for his friend and was just about to grab his hand when he was hit from below again. Once again, he is in the mouth of the hippo, and the hippo is thrashing about. The hippo spits him out again, and he swims as fast as he could. Then a giant bull hippo charges Paul with his massive jaws wide open, and it chomps down hard on his waist. Paul is literally hanging out the sides of this hippo's mouth. The hippo wants to inflict damage to Paul, it's clear. It thrashes about and throws him straight up in the air. When Paul comes back down, the hippo caught him in his massive jaws again. It was so hard it looked as if it was going to split him in half, one of the clients said, and then added it was like watching a vicious dog trying to rip apart a rag doll. Paul's intuition and smart thinking saved him when he decided to hold on to the tusks to avoid being gored and shredded further. The attack carried on for quite some time. The hippo would dive, then surface, giving Paul a chance to quickly breathe in the air he desperately needed. Then the hippo, tired, and dove for deeper water. Paul was still in the vice grip of the hippo's jaws. Paul remembers seeing the sunlight shining through the water, turning it different colors of green and blue, and then his blood turning the water red. It was then that Paul seemed to resign himself to the idea that he was probably going to die. Then suddenly the hippo lurched forward towards the surface and literally spat him out again. This time, fellow guide Mike, in the safety kayak, showed incredible courage by paddling into the danger zone to save his friend Paul, who was then able to climb onto the canoe. Apprentice guide Mike went to work patching up Paul with cut-up shirt strips to help staunch the blood flow and performing basic first aid. The other guide was searching for Evan, but it was so dark and there was no sign of him. Morale was quite low because the group didn't think there was much hope of a search party coming to look for them. Paul was bleeding quite severely and it was thick on the bottom of the canoe. And then another bull hippo bumped into the canoe again. Paul said the pain was excruciating and he knew he was in a life or death situation. He decided to fight with everything he had, but the pain was so intense that he wondered about his decision. But by then, he didn't seem to have a decision anymore. He was fighting for his life. The tour group made it to the shore, but still no Evan. They found his body 2 days later, but without a scratch on him. Sadly, the young guide had drowned. It took 8 hours to get to a hospital that had a surgeon that was capable of working on someone with such severe injuries. He had 38 major bite wounds. His left arm was crushed to a pulp, and from the elbow down was degloved. All the skin was torn off. He had a punctured lung, which Mike had sealed with Glad wrap from a plate of snacks. His Achilles tendon was torn out, and he had been gored with a tusk through his foot, the back of his neck, his head, and the top of his spinal column, the front of his face, and the cheek area. Paul has retired from his full-time safari job, but has gone back to Zimbabwe several times. These days he spends more time as a motivational speaker, sharing his miraculous story of survival across the globe. Sadly, he did lose his left arm from the attack. Wildlife experts say that hippos do kill more people each year in Africa than any other animal. A hippo with a calf is the most dangerous of all. A rogue male injured in a territorial fight with another male hippo or by poachers is also extremely dangerous. Hippos have small ears, bulging eyes, and wide mouths with powerful jaws and thick, sharp tusks several inches long. A hippo can swim or run underwater about 5 kilometers an hour. Hippos don't fear lions or crocodiles and will usually fight to the death, and even against their own kind. A bull hippo will even kill a baby calf just for crossing its path. They are not the chubby, cuddly creatures we think they are. They're very aggressive and territorial and need to be given a very wide berth or avoided at all costs. Here's a fun fact about Zimbabwe, Africa. There are 16 different languages spoken in this region alone. For more information about Paul, you can purchase his book. It's called What's Left of Me, and you can get that on his website, and I'll put that in the description box below. I always say it's good to support the people that take the time to write these books. Okay, guys, I think that's going to be it for tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you back here in a couple of days. Don't forget, hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications, and subscribe. Okay, bye for now.